Sports conversation with James Navalance on the Believe Network. Joining us today, Levi Weaver, staff writer for The Athletic, covering the Texas Rangers. First off, I appreciate you taking the time to get back to me and getting on this today.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to do it.
Much appreciated. So let's just start, your general background. I looked into it, you transitioned from music to then covering baseball. So I love that you already have a kind of different path than most people within your own industry. So
Yeah,
yeah, I would just love to hear a little bit more on all of that.
man. Yeah, I'll talk to college kids sometimes, and they're like, "Okay, so what I want to do is what you're doing. Show me what's the equation?" And I'm like, "This is unfortunately not math. It's more poetry, I think." Because I do not have a career path that I would recommend anyone attempting to duplicate. I got really, really lucky and had a lot of help from a lot of people. Um, so yeah, I did. I was a singer-songwriter for about a decade, toured around the U.S. and Europe, and I was not ever, like famous by any stretch of the imagination, but had a good enough fan base that even though it was small, I could stay in business and basically more or less broke even. I credit my wife for basically working to pay the rent while I was gone, and my music basically covered my music expenses. And the idea was that it would at some point take off to a level where she wouldn't have to do that. We did spend a year living in an RV in 2014, all of us together, and I got two kids. Just driving around the U.S. I mean, we hit like 46 states, so like, and most of them at least twice. So it was a long year, and then settled it back in Texas in 2015. And the plan was to write the next album and just kind of keep it going. But for whatever reason, my inspiration, I guess, was just gone. Like I forgot how to write a song, and so 2015 was a weird year. I planted a garden in my backyard and grew my hair down to about here, which is the opposite of how it is now. Um, and while I was doing that, I had a friend who worked at Channel 8, the ABC affiliate here in DFW, and he asked if I wanted to just do some blogging about the Rangers. They were the team that I'd watched growing up. Had always been a big baseball fan, and so I just kind of did that to give me something to do. So I wasn't just languishing for an entire year. And I kind of found that I enjoyed it. And so they had a full time girl that was at the ballpark all the time, kind of more of a non traveling beat writer, if there's such a thing. And she left to Guam in 2016. And so he asked, we kind of sort of mutually had this conversation. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard for me to continue my life as a songwriter if I can't write songs. And I kind of think maybe this is the next step for me. And he said, okay, but are you sure? Like the baseball schedule is it's pretty harrowing. And my man, I just lived in an RV for a year and played 200 shows. Like, yes, I think I can handle that. So yeah, I did that in 2016 and 17, and then could not convince them. I was in a freelance role technically, and so I couldn't convince them to give me a full time, salary or health insurance or all of those things. You got kids, you like care about your health all of a sudden, and so I started my own company. It was called The Upset, and it was kind of like The Athletic in that it was a subscription based site. Um, our plan was to try to expand to the places where The Athletic was not, because it was only in 6 or 8 cities at that point. Long series of events and coincidences, and basically The Athletic approached us and asked if they could just buy our site and that we would just be their Dallas vertical. So it was me. Sean Shapiro was our stars writer. We had uh, Kevin Turner and Jeff Kavanaugh were our Cowboys writers. And yeah, they brought us all on, and I've been at The Athletic ever since. And they've somehow not found the file to terminate my employment yet. So that's not a normal way to get to where I am.
That is, that story in itself is like inspirational because you have this passion, whether people get into whatever one thing. Like I'm also a college basketball coach along with doing this podcast here. So I'm in an industry where passion is kind of everything. And it's similar to you where it's like, yeah, low money, trying to make your way. And then, eventually, you get that full time gig and full time salary. And then, yeah, if you do have kids, like then you do start worrying about like the benefits and all those other things that come to it. What besides, and obviously the family, your wife, your kids was the biggest inspiration, I'm sure, to
Mhm.
pivoting and trying to really rekindle it. But what else was along that path that was like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna pivot off this. Obviously, you said you lost the inspiration to just write and find ways to make your music, but knowing it, and then obviously just knowing like, all right, like it's, and you didn't necessarily know it was gonna be the Rangers, but like, all right, this is an area where what I can still I can get somewhere where I can thrive in still.
Yeah, I think part of it was that I really just loved baseball. I collected as you can tell in the back, I collected baseball cards as a kid, and um, that was the one sport I had homeschooled until 8th grade, and so I went to a small school, so if you wanted to play a sport, you just go play it. You didn't have to make the team. You were going to get to be on the team. Was not good at football. I eventually quit that. I was not particularly good at basketball. A little better than football. I was good at track, but I freaking hated it. Like I ran distance and it was awful. I just did it because I could win. But baseball was the one sport, and I played little league growing up, and like it's complicated. The rules are complicated, which I loved, and the strategy is there, and it's um, baseball is a sport, and I know that the other sports are like this too. But for me, like baseball was a sport that no matter how long I had followed it, there's always something new to learn every day. Like you can be in baseball for 50 years and still learn something new. Um, and so, I mean, it was kind of that realization, like, well, look, I'm going to have to do something else. And there seems to be an opportunity here to do something in an area that I love. I might as well try it. If it doesn't work, then, I'm a year or two behind where I was figuring out the next thing. But man, if this is the next thing, phew, that'd be cool. And if it's not, then I can always say, oh yeah, for 2 years, I like went to Texas Rangers baseball games and interviewed players. And like, that'd be a fun story to tell. Um, so yeah, I really just, uh, oh, we have coffee coming.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah. Um, so I thank you. Um, so I really just kind of here's the other part of that is that my wife, who had paid the rent while I was gone in Nashville, also had a job here in Texas. And I hear a lot of people talking about, um, and I think this is an important topic and something that I was the beneficiary of. You talk about diversity in hiring, and you talk about trying to, a lot of companies will give lip service to this, but how do you hire a kid who comes from a background where they don't have parents or a spouse to support them, and they might have just as much talent as me, but just don't have the opportunity to go make $12,000 a year. Like they have to actually pay their rent, and they have to stay alive, or they have health problems or whatever. Um, and so, Heather was paying the bills, and that allowed me to work my way and like pay my dues a little bit for a couple of years, to the point that I sharpened my craft to where not that I knew what I was doing, but more knew what I was doing than when I jumped in on day
Hmm.
one. And two, was able to establish a body of work so that if I did want to apply for a job, I had, here are my mistakes. Let's not send those along. But also, I worked until I had some good things. It established a readership, or not a fan base necessarily, but a reader base, um, to where when I did start my own company, people followed me to where I was going. What I would love to see from that is more risks taken on people just straight into a full-time gig. And I understand if you're running a business, that's tricky to do. You want to get somebody who either has experience, or you can pay very little money while they get that experience. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it would be hypocritical of me not to acknowledge that I definitely had some breaks that came from other people being willing to believe in what I was doing and support that, until I was able to support myself.
Absolutely. That is, again, your story, as I told you just before we hopped on here, like it's really about for me, learning each other's stories and really what kind of makes people who they are and makes their stories their own kind of unique self. And obviously, your story here is really terrific and, inspiring. And you can just keep pushing along just to you find, your own path. So it's awesome. Let's get right into the Rangers now. Now
Sure.
you've been here, right? It's about to be 5 years, correct, for you covering the Rangers
Yeah, so I started in 16 full time. I just finished my 5th year with the Athletics, so I've done 7 seasons with the Rangers
in
now.
total, 7. Okay, so obviously, just before you get there, right? Ron Washington,
Mhm,
2010, 2011 World Series, like kind of at the peak. Josh Hamilton, Nelson Cruz, all those guys. Obviously, they fall short both times. Then there's this transition period where they've really struggled. And
mhm.
then they, build a new stadium, Globe Life Field, 2020, and now it's all right. Marcus Simeon, Corey Seager, let's shore up that middle of the infield. John Daniels leaves, and obviously now this year in free agency, Andrew Heaney, Jacob Degrom. So, what is this overall? Just this transition since you've covered them from the beginning to where you kind of are at now with them.
Yeah, my first year was 2016 when they won a bunch of one-run games and had a much better record than actually they were as a team, and they had the best record in the American League. So here I am year 1 on the job, and the Rangers win the division, and they go to the playoffs. I'm like, "This is gonna be, just like it has been since 2010. I've been watching this team go to the World Series. This is gonna be amazing." They have not had a winning record since then. So it's been just 6 years of trying to spin up a story out of somewhere. It has been nice to see, and I think this was I don't know how in depth you want me to get. I think they probably should have jumped into the rebuild pretty, with both feet, maybe in 2017 or 18. Um, but there was a new stadium coming. There's talk that there was some pressure coming from ownership that like we can't be in the middle of a 100 loss season our first year in the stadium. We have to be at least competitive. We have to have a
Mhm.
good team. So let's get through this quicker. And the Rangers did have some prospects. Jurickson Profar at one point was the number one prospect in baseball. Joey Gallo, Nomar Mazara, Ronald Guzman, Rougned Odor, Chichi Gonzalez. I mean, there's just name after name after name, a bunch of pitching guys that just never made the big leagues. That if those had all panned out, like they probably could have done that and just sort of skipped the rebuild part.
Mm.
Unfortunately, that didn't work out, and they had to completely revamp their player development system in 2018. I think they had gotten a little behind because they had been so successful. There was no need to tweak things. The rest of the league passed them up a little bit with a lot of the biomechanics and things like that. So in having to try to rapidly go through this rebuild, and also this core of young players kind of not really panning out. And Joey Gallo was really the only one that became a star in Texas and struggled since he left. It's just I think it has delayed the process of going through this. And so in 2020, of course, it's the first year in the new stadium, and we got a pandemic and fans can't come anyway. So really they could have just done it. Um, but it's been the process of building up the farm system to the point where if they need to make a trade, and I wouldn't be surprised to see one happen soon, they have that stockpile of young guys and guys that they hope will make this a sustainable window of contention. But in the meantime, they had to replace that core of guys that didn't pan out. And so the conversation with ownership in the front office was, all right, how much money are you willing to invest? Let's go. And they have invested, like you said, the three main guys are Corey Seager, Marcus Simeon, and Jacob DeGrom, but also John Gray, I think was a significant signing. Andrew Heaney, if he can stay healthy and if he can replicate the success from last year in Los Angeles, could be really good. Um, I think they're going to have a new left fielder at some point, but then you start to see these guys hit the big leagues, right? Josh Young came up at the end of last year. Jack Leiter is coming soon. Dustin Harris is a guy. Evan Carter looks like he's going to be a legitimately good player. Owen White looks like he's going to be a legitimately good pitcher. So they've got these guys that as they start to age into the big leagues, now they have these megastars there sort of waiting to welcome them in. Hey guys, here's how it goes. Here's the routine. Here's the way we behave as big leaguers, and establish that culture before the guys get there. instead of waiting for them to all come up, have a year or two of struggle as they establish their culture, and then go sign the big free agent to come in and hope they fit in the room. It's not a traditional path, but I am very interested to see if it works.
So and now the pieces, as you mentioned, all coming together here. Now you need someone to lead that way.
Right.
There probably is not a better guy to do it than Bruce Bochy. Obviously, all of his success with the San Francisco Giants. What are your expectations? Now, we've seen this with Tony La Russa going to Chicago, older guy,
Mhm.
kind of right away had success. And then obviously this year they struggle massively, health concerns, all that stuff. What are your kind of expectations for Bruce Bochy in year one and kind of the timeline of like how long really is he expect? Obviously it's year one, but kind of the longevity of him being there as well.
Right. So you mentioned Tony La Russa, which I think is a good example of how this can go wrong. But you've also got Dusty Baker in Houston, who just won a World Series. So I don't think that necessarily just as far as age goes, you can say, hiring an old manager does or doesn't work. I think it very much depends on the person. Um, Bochy went to the World Series with the Padres in what was that, 98? Went to the World Series, obviously, 3 times with the Giants, won all three. Um, he is clearly a good manager, future Hall of Famer. He's been out of the game since the end of 2019, and so there have been some changes, the rule changes, not just the new ones that are coming in this year, because everybody's dealing with those anew, but also like there was not a 3 batter minimum when he was a manager. He's never managed in the American League, so he never had a designated hitter to work with. He's had his double switches, and I think generally speaking, managing with the DH is easier than managing without it. But yeah, it'll be, I think, a couple of things. One, it will be interesting to see how quickly he catches up with the changes in the game since he left. It's been a rapidly evolving beast. Two, I think it seems that he has a really good relationship with Chris Young, who's the general manager. Young pitched for Bochy in San Diego, and it will be interesting to watch that dynamic. I know Young very much respects Bochy, respects his opinion, is going to let him kind of have the autonomy to do what he wants. Also, he's a new GM, and he's still, I say new, it's been a couple of years, but he's still figuring things out as well. So I don't think Bochy wants to stick around for a decade, right? He's not looking to do that. And I think it's interesting that they hired Will Venable as a bench coach. Venable was up for consideration for a number of managerial jobs, even this year. And so I think maybe what we're looking at is, if I had to put on my prognostication hat, probably like a try to make the wild card this year, try to win a World Series in 2024 or 25. And then at that point, whether it be 3 years or so, maybe 4 at the most, Bochy steps aside, and Will Venable would seem to be the heir apparent. Now, nobody has told me this. This is not insider information. I'm just sort of
Right.
trying to read the tea leaves. But I think we're probably looking at, at most a 3 or 4 year window with Bochy.
Now going here, Jacob DeGrom.
Yeah.
Now this is the piece. Like this feels like the piece that all right, like you bring in Bochy, they do what they did last offseason. This feels
Mhm.
like the piece where they finally had that respect. Obviously, they lose a lot of close games last year, a lot of one-run games. So, is this what additional pieces you mentioned the possibility of a trade,
Mhm.
down the road here? Kind of obviously the free agency window has gone a lot faster this year than
Right.
previous years with all the spending. Obviously, the trade market's been on the slower side. What do you see as maybe the piece that goes with not necessarily pitching, but goes with Jacob DeGrom as like the offseason piece that maybe a potential trade takes place?
Yeah, they've mentioned another outfield bat. For me personally, I'd love to see that be a left-handed bat, but Cody Bellinger's off the market already. Um, because see, I think Bubba Thompson can be a full-time big leaguer. I think his speed is, you want guys with speed, you want guys that are fast. His is above and beyond. And I think a guy who is that fast can impact a game not only with his defense, base running, beating out infield singles, getting on base via bunt and going nuts on the bases. I think he is like, I think it'd be very easy for him to be a very productive number 9 hitter in the lineup. Turning over the lineup, it's basically, second leadoff hitter at that point. Then if he does have some pop and he learns how to get on base at about a 350, 360 clip, well, you got your leadoff hitter. It doesn't seem that the Rangers are convinced that he's there quite yet, because the word that we've gotten from them when we've talked to them is about, what else are you going to do? What's coming next? Another outfield bat. Well, they're probably not talking about center field. Leody Taveras certainly struggled a bit last year, and maybe the trick is that Taveras goes in a trade and Bubba's the center fielder. I don't know. They're not talking about Adolis Garcia. So at that point, you're looking, okay, left field is the only position left.
Mhm.
And then they've talked about getting a couple more bullpen arms, which I think would be a good idea. They've had some success. Jose Leclerc and Jonathan Hernandez are back from Tommy John surgery. Both looked pretty good at the end of last year. Brock Burke was a revelation last year out of the bullpen. Taylor Hearn seems to have finally found his niche as a multi-inning reliever. He looked pretty nasty. Not a ton of success as a starter, but as a reliever, really looked great. So Joe Barlow was their closer for a while, and then he sort of crashed and burned. But if he's not in the closer role, if he's your sixth inning guy, a middle reliever, I think he's still a very passable bullpen piece. After that, unless I'm forgetting somebody, I don't know, I feel bad if I did. Expendable pieces, right? So I think they could stand to bring in a couple more solid relief pitchers, and especially guys who are capable of pitching multiple innings. I know they've got Hearn and Burke, but you look at the guys that are in the rotation right now. DeGrom pitched 64 innings last year. Heaney pitched, I think, 72. Jake Odorizzi pitched 103, and with Odorizzi, it's not as much an injury concern as it is he's just really effective 2 times through the order, and you really has not been, not to say that he can't. People evolve, people change, but at this point in his career, if you find out what's working, they may want to stick with that. You're going to need some innings at the end of his starts. John Gray was on the IL a few times last year. He's fully capable of going deep in games when he's healthy, but there's some concern there. And then Martin Perez had a great year last year. Was an all-star, pitched 196 innings. It was this breakout season that nobody saw coming. Can he replicate that? Or is he going to revert back to the Martin Perez of old, who would pitch 6 very good innings and 1 atrocious one? So the bullpen is going to be very important, as is their starting pitching depth with all the injury concerns. So Dane Dunning, Glenn Otto, Cole Reagans, those guys are going to be, I think, I'm sure if I was one of them, I would be feeling a little cool, well, you guys have acquired a full rotation and I'm not in it. I think all 3 of those guys, unless they're traded, will pitch significant innings for the Rangers this year.
Okay, so last part here. I'm really appreciative of your time, of course. So, we went through your background, we went through all this Ranger stuff. Now, my last question, and it's really the ethos of what I'm about,
Okay.
and kind of every guest I bring on is kind of this question, what's the best version of you in any way, professionally, personally? What's the best version of you?
Pressure to answer this question correctly, man. This is a hard one. Man, there are a couple of ways to answer this one. I think when I am inspired, if I can try and just be as succinct as possible about it, and whether that be my writing or whether that be my everyday life. If I'm inspired, then there's more the energy to do something well. And sometimes when I'm writing, that inspiration comes from an injection of last minute panic because I'm on deadline. But I would prefer, there's nothing like, I think this might be the case for not just me, but a lot of people, that when you are that feeling of inspiration where you're I know that this is a good idea, and I know, when you have that feeling, you will put whatever energy you want into it. And there's a difference between grinding it out, writing the story because you have to, right? This thing happened, and you have to write about it, and writing a story because, oh, I can't wait to read this when I'm done. Because I know that this idea is good, and I know that people are going to like this. And the same in life too. When you're making decisions about whether it be your career or whether it be about relationships or whatever, because you are inspired, and that's what you want to do, and you are in it. And man, want I gave you such a succinct answer, and then here I am giving you 10 more minutes on it.
Yeah.
What I mean by want is not the selfish, like hitting a candy store, like I want that. Ugh. But when you recognize that, like, that is a good thing, that is good. I want to participate in that. I want that to participate in me. I want my life to be influenced. I want the outcome of my life to be influenced by this idea or this person or whatever it might be. When you have that inspiration, then you will be more tireless in your work. And I don't believe in the grind. Um, I think that that is we could get into a whole bunch of reasons why I don't. I don't. Um, but when it is something that you are passionate about and when you are inspired, it won't be like there have been days I worked 10 hours, not because I was just like, oh, I got to get ahead. This is so I can make money. This is so I can climb the ladder.
Mhm.
But 10 hours because I was fully engaged in this. Like I'm like, I have to force myself to take a break to eat so that I don't get tired, because if I get tired, I'm not going to do as good at this. So I have to take care of
Mhm.
myself.
Yeah.
And like all of a sudden you're doing all the things that you've been told to do. You're taking care of yourself. You are working hard. You are, making good decisions that are not going to screw that thing up that you're so excited about. Um, and it's not something that can be, I think, faked, which is
Mhm.
unfortunate. I wish I could just like flip a switch and like go into inspiration mode. You can practice it, you can get closer to it because you know that that's the flow that you want to be in. But man, when it strikes, there's nothing. If I could bottle that up and just sell it, that I would never work another day in my life. I would be the richest man in the world because everyone would be so like, yes, that's the feeling I want. So yeah, in inspiration. I think there are some practices that call it flow. I think it may be a slightly different thing, but it's very very similar. So yeah, that's my short slash extremely long answer.
No, that's tremendous. Inspiration, yeah, like you're distinct about it, and then obviously you give all the great reasoning behind it. No, that is absolutely big time. This is Sports Conversation with James Navalance on the Believe Network. Levi, much appreciative of all your time. I love, as I said, getting into people's backgrounds, and you're probably, this is we're about a month and a week or so into this thing here, and
Yes.
your story is definitely the most unique so far, and awesome conversation.
Well, thanks, man. I'm glad to do it, and good luck. I hope this thing grows and does really well for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.